Azeron's not a bad character, which I know sounds a bit weird to say because I'm like, he kidnaps her. She acts like a special snowflake all of the time, and it's like, I'm so sick and tired of being stuck in your head. I'm always like, girl, stop believing in him. He's not good for you at all. Hi everyone, my name's Lauren and welcome to my channel. Today the video I'm filming for you all is another reading vlog because I've just finished filming my last weekly reading vlog, which if you've seen it, it was kind of a flop. I had two 2-star reads and one 4-star read. So the 4-star read obviously wasn't a flop, but the two 2-star reads were. So I'm really just in the mood to pick up books that I kind of know I'm going to enjoy and I'm like desperate to read. So maybe this vlog will be me mood reading for the next week. I'm not really sure. I don't know how long it's going to go for, but I've chosen 3 books off my shelves that I would really like to get to in this vlog, and I'm just going to jump straight into them. So the first book is a book I borrowed from the library, which I'm so excited to read. I've mentioned it last week, and if you've seen my announcement video for Project TBR Zero, I think I went on a bit of a rant about this book, and that book is Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. I am so excited to pick up this novel. I love one of Grace Draven's other works, but this is a completely different series from her. I know nothing about the plot. I have just wanted to read this book for years. Like ever since I've read Grace Draven's other series, I've wanted to pick up this book. So the fact that I finally have it in my hands makes me so excited. The only negative thing about picking this book up is it wasn't on my TBR. Like I don't actually own a physical copy because, as I said, this book is from the library. But I'm so excited to dive into this book. So that's what I might do first. Like this might be the first book I pick up in this reading vlog. And as I read these novels, I will give you like synopsises. But at this point in time, I don't really know. Well, except for the next 2 books because they're sequels. So for this, as I said, I know nothing about it, but I'm really excited to pick it up. Then if you've seen my reading fantasy romances, one of the series I picked up in that was the Broken Bond series. So this is the second book in the 6-book series by J. Bree. And in this world, we're following a character called... Oh, I hate character names. What's her name? Let me look. It might tell me what her name is. No, that's North. And in this book, we're following a character called Orlando. I don't know exactly how to say her name, but I think her last name's Fallow, so I might just call her... No, I'll just call her Orlando. Orlando. That's what we'll go with. So she's got these things called bonds who she runs away from, and as a result, they absolutely hate her so much. But then events happen which forces her to be back into their lives in this university setting. And we're just really seeing their interactions of them not liking her and her having her reasons for why she ran away, but we don't know exactly why as the reader. So it's really just trying to figure out why she ran away for their safety. Like, that's all we know. But I did enjoy the first book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I definitely want to continue on with this series in this vlog because the first book ended in such a cliffhanger, so I'm really excited to see where the story goes from here. And I don't really have anything else to say about Savage Bonds yet, so I will talk to you more once I've started reading it, but I don't know when that will be in this vlog. Then, the third and final book is probably actually the book I'm most excited to read. Like, even though I'm really excited to pick up Phoenix Unbound, the next book is a book I'm so hyped to read, and that is Glint. Yeah, Glint by Raven Kennedy. So I read Guild in the same reading vlog that I read Broken Bonds, which was like reading my entire TBR fantasy romance edition. And in that book, I found a new favourite book of all time, which was Guild. So I cannot wait to continue on with this series because I need to find out where Oren's storyline is going to end up, because the ending of that last book made me so excited. Like, I literally cannot wait. And even though not much happened in the first book and it was mainly vibes and no plot, it was still so engrossing. I loved Oren's character so much. She was just, even though she was naive, I was still really invested in her character and I just adored her so much. So I'm really excited to find out more about Oren. So as I said, I'm really excited to pick up Glint. But these are the 3 books I'm planning on reading in this reading vlog. I think the one, as I've already said, I might start off with is Phoenix Unbound, because I just know if I pick up Glint, there's literally nothing else I'm going to want to do. Whereas if I read Phoenix Unbound, that might not happen. And like, then I could maybe pick up Savage Bonds. I'm not really sure. So I'm probably going to start off with Phoenix Unbound. So I'll give you an update once I've made some progress into this book. So it's time for the first update of this reading vlog, because I've started reading Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. And in this book, we're following a character called Gillian. And she, for some reason, is living in a prison. And then one of the other members of this prison notices that she's got magical powers. And his name is Azeron? Azeron, maybe? And as I said, he notices she's got this special power, so he blackmails her to end up helping him to escape this prison. And she thinks, oh, I'm just going to help him escape this prison and then I can go on my own merry way. But what ends up happening is he ends up kidnapping her. Because of this special magical powers she possesses, she is forced to help him try and reclaim the throne. Because without her support, because of her status in this world, he is not able to reclaim the throne. So he kidnaps her basically and is like, you're coming to help me. And then I think slowly a relationship's going to form between these 2 characters, because we're already getting that kind of tension between them at the beginning. And from what I've read, I'm up to chapter 10 and I'm 154 pages in. I'm really enjoying it. I read it one night and I read all of this in one single night. I loved it so much. I'm really enjoying Gillian as a main character. She is a very strong female main character, and I love how she's always trying to help her own people, but she's being forced to help Azeron, so she's in this position where she doesn't really have a choice. But even though she's in this position where she doesn't have a choice, she's really making the best of the situation. And Azeron's not a bad character, which I know sounds a bit weird to say because I'm like, he kidnaps her. He's really doing it because he wants to reclaim his status as the clan leader, which I don't really understand why he's not the clan leader. It hasn't really delved into that yet. So I'm really invested in trying to see why that is the case. And I'm really just, as I said, having a fun time reading this. I read all of this in one night, so it's a really quick read. And I'm really excited to get back into this novel and see how it will wrap up. I really don't have much else I want to say about this book yet because I just don't. So my plans for the rest of the day is probably to go get downstairs now and get food and then just sit down and read Phoenix Unbound. So I'll give you my final update once I've finished this book, and I'll speak to you then. So, I finished reading Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven, and I think this is going to be a 4 out of 5 stars. It was a really good book, but it's definitely not a new favourite, and I'm afraid that I feel like this book is going to be one of them books that you read, and when you read it you really enjoy, but then once it's been like a month or 2 you'll forget things that have happened in it. So it wasn't one of the most memorable books I've ever read, unfortunately. And the thing that makes me so disappointed that I didn't love it more than I did was the fact that I've been hyping up this book for so long and I've just wanted to enjoy it so badly. I really did like the characters of Gillian and of Azeron, and I like the chemistry between them 2 characters. But I feel like because this is a standalone novel in a series, the pace of this novel made the relationship develop way too quickly for me. Like, I've always got these things when book couples get together in the first book. Well, this is the only book following this couple, I think, because I know that the next book follows different characters. But when it's a standalone novel, it makes it hard for the romance to be believable, because they went from being really mistrusting of each other to all of a sudden being in love. Well, not in love, but they like each other and then they fall in love. So it was just a bit too fast for me, and that can be said about the rest of the book as well, because the whole book just felt a bit too fast, because the plot of this novel moved along so quickly. Like, we followed them in the prison and then their escape, and then it just, like, the last 100 pages flew by with the story. Like, it was so quick. I did enjoy the side characters, but there was no characters that I got really obsessed with. And for me to love a book, I really need to be obsessed with the characters, which I wasn't in this book. And it seems like it's a bit difficult for me to come up with things to say about this book, because even though it was a really good book, as I've already said, it was not really that memorable. But I am definitely still planning on continuing on with this series, because I do like Grace Draven's works enough, and they're just really quick palette cleansers that I can easily read through. And that's one of the reasons as well this book is so disappointing, because I loved Radiance by Grace Draven. Like, that book was incredible. So I was kind of hoping that this book wouldn't be the exact same plot, but that I would have got attached to the characters as much as I did in Radiance, which didn't happen in this book, which is one of the reasons why this book was a letdown. And the actual plot of this novel I didn't enjoy as much as Radiance, but as I said, I am still planning on continuing on with this series. So I think I'm going to stop talking about this book here, and if I've got anything else to say, I'll say it at the very end of this vlog when I wrap it up. So my plans now for the rest of the night are, I actually don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to start reading Savage Bonds or if I want to read Glint. Like, I want to read Glint because I loved the first book so much, and then I want to read Savage Bonds because I feel like if I read Glint, I'll just want to pick up the third and fourth book so badly. Whereas if I read Savage Bonds, it will be more easier for me to pick up Glint because I'm so invested in picking up this book. Whereas, I'm taking this off. Whereas I'm not as hyped to read Savage Bonds as I am Glint. So I think that might be my next book. So I might pick up this one next, but if I change my mind, I will let you guys know once I make progress into either of these books. Okay, I finished Savage Bonds by J. Bree last night, and this was not my plan at all, because I was like, I'll read this book and I'll start making some progress into it last night, and I was thinking I would get to the halfway point, but then as soon as I started it, I was like, just one more chapter, and every time I got to the end of that extra chapter, I was like, just one more. So I literally could not put this novel down, because J. Bree's just got a way of storytelling where you just need to find out what's going to happen next, because there's certain scenes that I wanted to see happen and they didn't happen in this book, and I was like, oh, this makes me so sad. But there's certain things that you really want to see which I did not see, which was unfortunate, but it's fine. So I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but my main complaint is I don't like Orlando as a character. I find her to be quite infuriating because she acts like a special snowflake all of the time, and it's like, I'm so sick and tired of being stuck in your head. Like, I'm not interested. She is just an infuriating character, which makes it hard to enjoy this book as much as I potentially could. Like, if I found Orlando to be a better protagonist, or I was more attached to it, I feel like this could have been a 5-star read, because I just did not want to put it down, and I haven't had that with a reading experience in a long time. So it was such a fun read. I loved everything about it except for Orlando. Like, the plot of the novel was so interesting. I really did like her bonds. I know in one of my previous reading vlogs, I really didn't like the bullying aspects of it, But in this book, it really toned that down so much. In this book, it was more like they just didn't really like her, which I much preferred because I was so sick of them bullying her, and I didn't really like the non-consent that we saw in the first book. But this novel really improved on all of them elements. And out of my favourite bonds, I know in my last reading vlog I was saying I did not like Nox at all. I found I was really invested in Nox as a character in this book because there's a few of her bonds that are starting to just really support her, and it's like you really want that, but for some reason that made the story not as enjoyable. Like once they were rooting for her and like supporting her, I was like, oh, this is a bit boring. Whereas Nox is still so petty, and I always have loved a petty character like so much because there's just something about this pettiness that I'm always find so interesting when I read a character like that. And then I really did also like North. I liked Griffin because Griffin I really did enjoy in the first book as well, but in this book he was really pissed off with Orlando, which I really liked seeing with him. I'm sick and tired of Atlas. I really don't care for him as a character. He's automatically obsessed with her, and it's like, why? And then who else? Gabe. I also spoke about how I felt like Gabe wasn't really present in the first book, and I found he was a very forgettable character. Whereas in this novel, he played a major role in it. I don't find him to be a forgettable character at all, but I'm not really a fan of the role he played in this book, if I'm honest. So because I did like the bonds, but I don't like Orlando. I don't even really like the relationship she has with these guys because it's like none of it's believable, because it's like all of a sudden with some of these characters a switch just flips and it's like, hang on a second, where did that come from? But it's so much fun. So like these definitely aren't the best works out there. I'm not really reading it for the fantasy world, even though it is very interesting, but it's a very character driven story, so the plot takes a back burner because you're just really following her interactions with her bonds, which I loved so much. So there's lots of good things about this. It's just mainly the characters that make it not a fantastic read for me. So as I said, it's a 4 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to pick up Blood Bonds because this book ended on such a cliffhanger. Well, not really. It wasn't like a major cliffhanger, but it was still a cliffhanger enough to where I want to pick up Blood Bonds fairly soon. So maybe I'll get to Blood Bonds in August. But I definitely do recommend this series if you just want a quick, fun time, because they're so much fun. And like, there's not much else I can say about it because it's a sequel, so I don't really want to go into spoiler territory. But, oh wait, there's one more thing I want to say before I move on. So there's this character called Sage, and I've always been really interested in her character. I love Sage so much as a character. Like, she's just so cute every time I see her. And I also really like her relationship with Felix. And there's one character who Sage has a relationship with that I want to see more about, and I think it could be Kieran. I could be completely wrong with the name. So I really want to see where their storyline's going to go. But they're all my thoughts on Savage Bonds for the moment, and if I've got any I'll just update you guys at the end of this reading vlog, because I feel like I'm a bit tired when I'm updating you guys because I've been at work all day, so I feel like my brain's not really functioning properly. So now my plans for the rest of the night is to pick up Glint by Raven Kennedy. I've taken off the dust jacket for the moment, but I'm so excited to dive into this book because I read Guild last month and absolutely adored it. It was a 5-star read, one of my favourite books of all time. And I've been thinking about reading Glint ever since I've finished Guild because I'm so invested in seeing where Oren's storyline goes. And she's had such an impact on me as a character because I never remember character names, but I remember Oren's name so clearly because she was just such a brilliant character. So I cannot wait to see where her storyline's going to go in Glint. So I'm going to give you guys an update once I've made some progress into Glint, and hopefully I just won't binge this like I did with Savage Bonds, and that I'll give you an update at the halfway mark because that's very much needed. So I will speak to you once I've read some of Glint. So I wanted to give you all an update because I started reading Glint by Raven Kennedy. I've managed to get up to page 179, which is chapter 22. So I'm about up to the halfway mark, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, I'm not really sure. So in this series, we're following a character called Orin, and she is made up of gold, as you can see in this naked hardcover. And because of that, King Midas has kept her locked away in a palace for her protection, which is what he says to Orin for his justification for why he needs to keep her locked up. And Orin believes him because King Midas saved her when she was a child, and she's also in love with him. So there is like a Stockholm syndrome type situation going on here, which you should be aware of. And I think that's all I'm going to tell you about this book, because literally in the first book it was just set up. There was not much happening in the plot. It was literally her being in a palace, her walking to a new location, and then her being on a pirate ship. They were the three major settings we got to see, and that's really all. So the first book was definitely vibes and no plot. Like, that's really all it was. Whereas Glint is definitely getting more action-packed. Well, not action-packed, that's not the right word. The plot is expanding because we're getting introduced to a whole new cast of characters. Orin's in a new setting, and I just love it. I love this book so much so far. It's definitely got 5-star feels because the new characters that we've been introduced to are actually incredible. I'm especially loving the character of Rip because he's just so good. Like, I love his character so much because of the interactions that he has with Orin. Orin is very mistrusting of Rip and the rest of the people who she is surrounded by. Because of the way her life has been so far, she hasn't been around many good people, so she automatically comes from a position of being like, these people can't be trusted and they're gonna hurt me, which makes total sense. So that's why I've really got a soft spot for Orin, because it's like, I totally get where you're coming from. Like, sometimes you read novels and you're like, you don't really agree or understand the character motivations, whereas in this book I might not necessarily agree with what she's doing, but that's just because I'm coming from it of a point of like knowing kind of maybe more guessing what's going to happen next. Whereas Orin has grown up where everyone's just been absolutely terrible to her, and these people are not necessarily good people in her eyes, so it makes total sense as to why she's acting the way she is. So I've just got a really soft spot for her, and I don't know what it is about Orin as a character that makes me love her so much, because it's like, she's not necessarily the best character out there, but there's just something really endearing about her. And I love how she always tries to see the light in the situation, because even though her life has been terrible, she's not letting her get that down. Instead, she's really trying to just, as I said, see the positives. So she's just a really fantastic character. And then there's so many characters I hate in this series so far. I really hate King Midas. I have not read a book where I hate a character as much as King Midas. I just think he is so terrible, so disgusting, and honestly he deserves to die. Which really bothers me, because Orin has an infatuation with him, and like, she thinks she's in love with him and he loves her back, but it's like King Midas does not love her in any regard. Like, it's so obvious, which is just so frustrating. But like, as I said, I understand, because Orin is definitely suffering from Stockholm syndrome, like 100%. So I'm really hoping, and I know we'll see her work through that, because we're already seeing that kind of happen in this book. Even though she's still trying to justify what King Midas has done to her, she can also see that there's some things that actually can't be justified, which is really well done. I hate the King's Saddles, because the King's Saddles are people who serve the king, and I understand why they hate Orin, but I'm like, really, stop hating Orin when she's literally done nothing wrong other than being the king's favoured. Like, why do you hate her so much? So that's quite infuriating. And then we've also got three more characters from Rip's party who I'm really enjoying their interactions with Orin, because in this book it's really good, because we're getting to see more characters who are actually good, because in the first book it was just so dark. It literally felt like there was no good characters except for one other. And Oren just felt so isolated from the rest of the world, and she didn't really have anyone in her corner. Whereas in this book, I can see how we're getting characters who more likely are going to be her support system and will be in her corner, because some of the things that these characters are saying make it so obvious that they don't agree with what King Midas has done, which I totally agree with, so I'm really excited about that. But I'm just loving this book so much. It's so good. And I think I'm going to stop talking about this book now for the moment, because will give you my final thoughts once I've actually finished it, and then if I've forgotten anything I can update you guys there. So my plans now for the rest of the night are to do uni work, because all my uni stuff has been released, and then I really want to finish Glint by the end of the night, which is definitely possible because I've only got like how long, 200 pages left to go, just under 200 pages, so it's definitely possible. So yeah, that's all I've got to say, so I'll speak to you in my next update. I've finished reading Glint. It is now officially time for the final update of this reading vlog, because I finished reading Glint by Raven Kennedy last night, and this book is definitely a 5 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed this book a whole lot more than the first book. The way we were introduced to all new characters and we got more character development with Oren is one of my favourite things, because in the first book, Oren is very naive to the situation she's in, whereas in this book, she's really starting to realise just how bad her environment actually was. But she's still trapped in the cycle of being obsessed with Midas, which I'm not really a fan of because I hate Midas so much. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. I have never hated a character as much as I hate Midas. I just think he is a disgusting pig who just needs to be destroyed. Like, honestly, there is nothing good about his character, and I understand why Oren, like, believes in Midas, but I'm always like, girl, stop believing in him. He's not good for you at all. So that really frustrates me, and it's like, ugh, it's just so terrible. And I love the characters that we met in this book, because in the first book, the characters weren't very good, but in this book, we're getting introduced to a whole new cast of characters who you can just tell really do have Oren's best interests at heart, and I loved that so much. I feel like I've already said this in my last update, like everything I'm saying now, but I'm just going to repeat myself, and I'm sorry about that, but I just need to reiterate these facts. And then the last 100 pages of this book was incredible. I loved it, and as always in this type of storytelling fashion, is the ending was fantastic and ended on such a cliffhanger, and I cannot wait to see where the plot goes from here, because we've got a reveal which was obvious. Like, it wasn't a surprising cliffhanger at all. It's like, oh, I knew that would be the case from the beginning. Like, I guessed it. But even though I guessed it, it didn't impact my view on this book. I just find Oren, as I said, to be such an amazing character, so I can't help but root for her. But I feel like if you don't like Oren as a main character, you're not going to like this book, because we're stuck in her head so often. And another aspect I just realised I didn't like about this book was we got a new character perspective, and it's like, I'm not interested in this new character. It's like, stop going on. I don't care. But the good thing is that she only had 4 or 5 chapters, which was enough to read through. It's like, oh, I can get through this. But if it had been any more, I would have been so bored. I just love this book so much, and I really don't feel like I've got anything else to say, because I spent so long ranting about this book and how incredible it was in my last update. So I don't want to just keep repeating myself, so I'm going to stop here and just say I'll definitely be picking up Gleam next month, and I could not be more excited. So now I'm going to wrap up the rest of this reading vlog, but first let me get the rest of the book so I can talk about them. So these were the 3 books I managed to read this week, and we started off with Phoenix Unbound, which was a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. However, I already can tell that this is going to be a forgettable read. Like, it's not going to be a read that sticks with me, because I am already starting, well, I'm not starting to forget things about it, but I can just tell that give me a month or two, I will have forgotten a lot about this plot because the characters haven't really stayed with me, the storyline hasn't stayed with me, but it was a good book for the time, so it's definitely a book that's just more enjoyable when you read it, but it doesn't stick with you. But I'm still really happy I've read it, and I'll definitely be continuing on with this series. So I was just filming my last update of this reading vlog, and I realised I was holding up Blood Bonds this whole time rather than Savage Bonds. So in this next clip, you're going to see me hold up Blood Bonds when it's actually meant to be Savage Bonds, because I just picked up the wrong book off my shelf. It's so sad. So yep, I'm holding up the wrong book, so that's all. The next 4 out of 5 stars I gave was to Blood Bonds, and this is the second book in the Bonds That Tie series. I enjoyed this book a whole lot more than the first book. This book was actually incredible because we got to see character growth, but I really didn't like the main character of Orlando. I just found her to be infuriating. On the other hand, I loved all of the Bonds. I got so attached to them, except for maybe Atlas. And yeah, no, Atlas I didn't really get attached to. I do like Gabe, I do like North, and I do like Nox, and I do like Griffin. Like, them 4 I love, but Atlas I'm a bit iffy about, and then Orlando I just hate her as a main character. And when I read the first book, I don't think I minded her character, but with this one, I definitely feel like it's not one for me at all. It's just not the right kind of vibes for me, her character perspective. And like, being stuck with her thoughts this whole book, I'm like, I just don't care. And if the main character was one that I could root for, I definitely feel like this book would have got a 5-star, because the actual plot of this novel was brilliant. And the way the story turned out, I loved. I loved the world. I loved the magic system. I loved getting to know more about this society. I liked the university setting. So I liked everything about this book except for the main character, which I'm such a character-driven reader. So if I don't really like the main character, it does really impact my experience with this book and books in general. But it was still a 4 out of 5 stars, and the way that these books always end on a cliffhanger and you just automatically want to go into the next book just makes me want to pick it up. Like, I think it ended on a cliffhanger, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I think I do. So yep, a 4 out of 5 stars. And then the final book I read was Glint, which I finished last night, and it's all the wrong way. This was a 5 out of 5 stars. There's nothing negative I can say about this book. I loved every aspect of it. I just adore it. I cannot wait to continue on with this series. And I'm so glad I waited until now to pick this series up, because I only have till September to wait, and then I can wrap up this whole series. So like, reading 2 books a month and then by September I will be finished is so good. And although the issue with that is it's going to be difficult for me to get my hands on the final book, so I'm just going to need to figure out a way to get that to happen, because I definitely want to wrap up this series, because I need to find out where these characters' storylines are going to go, even though I'm only up to the 2nd book out of a 6-book series, but still, I'm so excited for it. So yeah, these were the 3 books I've read in this reading vlog. So I'm now going to wrap this video up, because I feel like I've had a fairly good reading week, with having 2 4-stars and 1 5-star read. Like, I'm so glad I enjoyed all of these books I read, because I definitely needed that compared to last week. Whereas last week I really struggled because I had 2 2-star reads and 1 3-star read. So it wasn't a good week for me at all. Whereas this week is a whole lot better. And I'm so glad I just mood read for the week, because I knew that these books had the potential for me to really enjoy, because I enjoyed either the first books in their series, or I've enjoyed books by these authors before. So I'm so glad I read these books. Definitely a really good reading week for me. So I'm now going to stop blubbering on and just say I hope to see you next time, and bye.